Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark from Living by Mark Szczepura. The book I will review today is Hunger. Before we continue, this is a personalized limited edition of Hunger with leather cover, designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself, if you're interested. Now let's get back to the review. Hunger is a novel written by Norwegian writer Knut Hamsun and published in the last decade of the 19th century. It is considered by some the first modern psychological novel of the 20th century, but this is arguable. One thing for sure is that Hamsun was a literary pioneer who inspired a specific genre of fiction and influenced many later writers, such as Kafka, Hemingway, Henry Miller, and Thomas Mann. Hamsun was a rather controversial figure, a Nobel Prize winner, and a Nazi sympathizer. But who are we to judge somebody without knowing their circumstances? Yes, he quietly supported Hitler and his occupation of Norway, but I think it was motivated more by his dislike or hate of the English than his liking of the Germans. Hamsun was called the greatest writer of all time by Charles Bukowski, but Bukowski liked to exaggerate. And he also called Celine the greatest writer of the past 2000 years. So you can take his opinion with a grain of salt. What is Hunger about? If I was to describe it in a single sentence, it would be: the book is about human irrationality when faced with difficulties. Hunger deals with the strength of human emotions over logic, even if they are destructive. I think this line from the novel sums it up nicely. Truth is neither objective nor the balanced view. Truth is a selfless subjectivity. Basically, it is your feelings that decide how you see and deal with the truth. Now, a bit of the plot. I will try not to go into any details, only generalities, to give you some idea of the flow of the story. Hunger is a semi-autobiographical novel based on the author's early and difficult adulthood before he achieved any literary success. The story takes place in the second half of the 19th century in Oslo, which at that time was called Christiania. The main character and the narrator is an unnamed young man who is dealing with constant hunger, poverty, and rejection. The book is divided into 4 parts, and each one starts with the protagonist penniless and hungry. His situation changes slightly, but never permanently, and at the beginning of each part, the narrator finds himself in a dreadful economic conditions. The story starts with the protagonist waking up in his attic room, for which he hasn't paid in a while. He sneaks out to avoid the landlady and wanders the streets looking for food and work. He quietly contemplates the difficulty of his life, which he disrupts with an occasional vocal rant. He observes and interacts with people around him, and he also pawns part of his belongings in a punishing exchange of being hungry for being cold. His aimless roaming is interrupted by a somewhat pleasant encounter with a young woman he names Ila Yali. As the story progresses, our hero, provoked by his pride, leaves his lodgings before being evicted and spends the next night sleeping in the woods. Finally, his fortune takes a turn for the better when he is rewarded with 10 kroner for the few hours of literary inspiration. Part 2 starts a couple of weeks later. Our protagonist is back to starving, but has a roof over his head in an abandoned stable. He is in the middle of of a writing block, and he fails to earn or borrow money. He spends a night in jail as a homeless person, but his pride doesn't let him stay for breakfast. In the end, the narrator's savior is a friend he runs into and who takes pity on him. At the beginning of part 3, the protagonist is starving again. He can't write and earn money. His fortunes turn when a store clerk makes a mistake and leaves the narrator with some cash, with which he buys food, but unfortunately his stomach rejects it. Perhaps because he feels tormenting guilt for the way he got the money, so he gives the rest of it to a street seller. This time our friend is saved by a paper editor and a 10-kroner advance. Further on, he runs into Ilayali and manages to go on a date with her. In the final part, we find our young man living in a bed and breakfast. As usual, he has no money, owns rent, and is in the middle of a writing block. He is humiliated by the landlady and evicted. A gift of 10 kroner which he received by mail is quickly disposed of by his misguided pride, and he finds himself back where we met him, penniless and hungry. And that's the basic plot. What did I think about hunger? Hunger is the type of a book that I really enjoy because of its psychological theme that deals with human emotions, such as alienation, obsession, and self-destruction, challenges that are timeless and ever-present. It also shows the strength of emotions like pride and self-respect, which can and often do prevail over physical needs. It was not my intention to collapse. No, I would die standing, says the protagonist. Further, the book contains profound inner monologues and discussions, perhaps to make the personal problems more external in an effort to try to get some distance from them. Some of it might sound like the rambling of a madman, but he is pretty conscious and aware. He says, I was conscious all the time that I was following mad whims without being able to do anything about it. Despite my alienation from myself at that moment, and even thought I was nothing but a battleground for invisible forces, I was aware of every detail of what was going on around me. The protagonist often has impulsive and reflexive responses when faced with rational situations. To illustrate the power of emotion over logic, he says, no matter how much I kept telling myself that I was behaving like an idiot, it was no use. Hunger is a collection of events and experiences where the only commonality is the narrator. There is no strict chronology. The incidents could be shuffled around and the interpretation would be the same. The book could start or stop at almost any part and it would still be a great reading. The prevailing condition throughout the novel is hunger, to show the psychological and physical effects of it on a person. Even when the narrator has food or money for it, he still goes hungry because his stomach shrank and rejects food. Hunger also serves to show how irrational and emotion-driven we humans can be, even when faced with questions of physical survival. The protagonist is a young man, somewhat based on Hamsun himself. Since the novel is semi-autobiographical, some of his reactions can be considered immature or even childish. He is a writer who most of the time is suffering from writer's block, with an occasional moment of inspiration. This creates a chain effect where he cannot earn enough money. Therefore, he suffers from hunger and poverty. Because, or despite it, he connects with the suffering of others, and often he puts their suffering above his own. Hunger was written in the early years of Hamsun's writing career, and the author transports his real suffering onto the paper. And that's what makes this book so intense. The pain is real and fresh. The uncle character, who refuses to help our hero, even though it is visibly obvious he's starving, was probably based on Hamsun's real uncle, who used to beat and starve him. I like suffering heroes, whether it is Knut Hamsun, Henry Miller, or Charles Bukowski. The man who doesn't take anything for granted, the man who fights for necessities of life and can still create. Perhaps it is the suffering of the protagonist that makes the story real and so human. To sum it up, the book is about maturing the hard way, about realizing that in order to survive, you will need to exchange most of your time for money, and there are social rules that need to be followed as well. Perhaps not so much now, and the level of hunger and physical suffering the narrator faces might be difficult to find in the modern Western world, and because of it, younger people might have difficulty in penetrating below the surface of this novel. Not to say that you need to experience extreme hunger in order to appreciate this book. The hunger in the book is just a symbol of rational and physical in struggle with somewhat absurd and occasionally unsound human reasoning. So, who could enjoy this novel? Probably people who are fascinated by human psychology and its contradictions. I would say somebody who likes such works as The Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller, Factotum by Charles Bukowski, Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell, or Celine's Journey to the End of the Night. Life as one long cycle of suffering, peppered with scarce moments of relief to give some hope to the struggle. Even there are some Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, where the protagonist Raskolnikov's psychological profile might have served as not inspiration, since the inspiration was Hamsun himself, but to spice up the main character. A few people prefer Hamsun's later writing because it was more rehearsed and sophisticated. But to me, hunger is as real and as close as you can get to the writer. As I mentioned before, I enjoy hunger, maybe because I usually don't start with any expectations or prejudgments. I can enjoy as much writing style as the plot, and it is not necessary for both of them to be great to make a good reading. For the film buffs, there is a 1960s Scandinavian adaptation of the novel, which is pretty good. It was done in black and white, and this lets the film to carry on from the book the cold and somber mood. It is well worth seeing as a supplement to the reading. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback, which I transform into a hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A naturally tan hide I buy from a tannery in North Spain. It is same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. Well, first I designed the cover, which I did here. I took a painting by Hamsun countryman Edvard Munch, which was done about the same time the book was published, late 1900, except of the screaming face, I used this more humble individual who I think represents more the protagonist of the book. Anyway, I think the image goes nicely with the book. Okay, then I take a copy of the paperback and I add wood boards to the front and the back of the cover, as you can see here. And I reinforce the spine with cotton cords, which you can see if you open the book far enough. And I also add add bookends to the bookends, since without them the book seems a little naked. And I cover everything with a cloth tape. I also reinforce the inside of the book with the same tape, and sometimes I even go into a second page if the book requires. Well, this one didn't. Next, I dye the leather with leather inks, and I cover the outside and the inside of the book with it. Instead of glue, I sew the cover with thick cord, which to me looks nicer and gives the book more quality. Also, I can print something on the inside, as I have done here. This is an excerpt from the book, but I can print something personal as well. Now, I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So, if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. But the book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So, if you want one, don't snooze or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here, and until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.